I was invited by a group of people from the Denver Botanical Garden, most, Panioti, colitis. And he put this group together, and I was lucky enough to be invited to go along. And the purpose of this trip was to see plants, of course, because we're all a bunch of plant freaks. And we had a guide that helped us. You'll see her picture. Her name is Marcella. She was a professor at the university in Bariloche, and she went with us every day, and she really helped us out. So I do have a lot of material to show, so I'm going to plow forward. And if people interrupt me a lot, I'm just going to keep talking, because we won't get this done if there's a lot of big interruptions. So here we go. So we spent most of the time in Neuquen, and at the bottom of the screen, you can see San Carlos de Bariloche. That's where we flew into. I was surprised just at how far away it was. It was an 11-hour flight to go from Houston to Buenos Aires. So it's a further distance than going to Europe. And then we got to Buenos Aires, and we took a 2-hour flight to get to Bariloche. There's a little bit of information there on the left-hand side of the screen. You can see the temperatures in the seasons. The record high is 95, and I don't think there's very many days that are over 85. And the record low is 13 below zero. The annual precip is 32 inches with 4 feet of snow. And I forgot to get the pointer out. But if you see Bariloche is right on the base of the Andes. And we started around Bariloche, and then we went north all the way up to the top of the image. And so we were just meandering a little bit into the steppe and a little bit into the mountains. And then at the end, once we got up to Volcanoes, then we took a turn and went down to Neuquen and flew home. So most of the time we were in sight of the Andes, so all the time we saw mountains. We got to Bariloche late in the day, and I've been to Austria several times, and Bariloche looks just like Austria. The architecture is similar to what you'd see in the Alps in Europe.
Nazis down there.
They have the big roof extending over the walls of the building to help keep the snow off. This is a mountaineering club in Bariloche. This is one of the municipal buildings, a big stone building with the tower with the clock on top, just like something you'd see in Austria or Switzerland or northern Italy. This is part of the city of Bariloche. There's lakes almost everywhere you look, and almost everywhere off to the west you see the Andes that are snow covered all the time. We were here in December, so that's the very beginning of summer, and it was still pretty chilly. We had to wear jackets almost all the time.
What's the height of that snow?
I don't know. It's just hot. I'll tell you the elevation of lots of the mountains, but there's only 10 million mountains in the Andes. So this is what Bariloche looks like when you're right in the thick of the town. I was down standing by the lake next to Bariloche, and a steep slope, and the houses are pretty crowded going up the hillside.
What time of year is that?
December.
Okay.
So the next morning, we get up, and our project This day was to go to Cerro Campanario. And on the way, it was just jaw dropping all the time to see the scenery. It was just unbelievably beauty. Flowers everywhere, mountains. Whoops. There. So we got to the base of that mountain Campanario, and there's several ski resorts around Bariloche. This is one of the smaller ones, but we took a series of ski lifts to get up to the top of the mountain. And as we started climbing, then you could see lakes all around. And the water in the lakes is primarily from glaciers that melted at the end of the last ice age. The water is very clean, very pure. We continued to climb higher and higher up on the ski lift, and the area around Bariloche is in a national park, Nahuel Huapi National Park, and there's many lakes that are in this national park. So we got up to another end of a ski lift, and just the scenery was just overwhelming. Mountains everywhere, water. It's not something you're used to seeing living in New Mexico. And that's the high elevation part of Cerro Campanario. As I recall, the elevation is around 7,000 feet, 7,500, something like that.
Is that a little building with the red top?
Looks like it. Yeah, they have. Well, Catherine has been here camping and hiking, but they have a lot of what they call refugios, and they have hiking trails that it's quite a popular sport, or activity. Well, a lot of Argentinians are really into the outdoors, and they have these cabins that you can book them. I think you have to book them online, and then you can reserve it for a day, and then it's yours. So if you're hiking up in the mountains on these trails, then you can book these cabins as a shelter for the night. So we came back down, and is this what your impression of Argentina would be?
Like the glacier.
Yeah, yeah. This is a really high-end ski resort. And in the north hemisphere summer, June, July, August, September, a lot of people from the northern hemisphere that are really into skiing in a big way, or to keep their training fresh, they come down here and ski. So this is a place for the more wealthy Europeans to come and stay and go skiing. Some of the wildlife, the southern lapwing with the iridescent colors on the body. The bird was about a little bit bigger than a pigeon. And I couldn't believe the number of orchids we kept seeing. Just this plant, Chlorea philippi, is an orchid, and we saw, I probably saw on the order of 100,000 orchids. They were very widespread. I did not expect to see, I think we saw more orchids than any other family of plant.
A lot of different species. A lot of different species. Or
No,
Just that one.
it was a few. There was a few. We were heading on our way to another mountain to climb, and it was so common to see flowers all around, just enormous numbers of flowers. Of course, it was springtime or early summer there, so the height of the flower season. There's a lot of calceolarias in Patagonia. I'm not going to show too many, but it's a really complicated flower. Where the red dots are, there's a big hollow pouch inside where the pollinator goes in to work on the flower.
That type of orchid?
No. But one thing about taking flower pictures in Patagonia, most of the time it's windy there. It's either windy or it's close to a hurricane blowing. So it's really hard to get pictures of flowers when they're flying around. We went to a forest by Bariloche, and this is a protected forest, and I'd never seen anything like these trees. They have walkways here so people don't step on the ground close to the trees, because if you step on the roots, then you damage the trees. But look toward the top center, just a little bit to the left of center on the tree. You can see through it. These trees were like Swiss cheese, full of holes. And I couldn't take a picture of the tree because they're 100 feet tall and there were so many trees around.
What kind of trees are they?
It says on the screen, Luma apiculata. No, me either. So, as we got toward the end of this next day,
So beer garden.
we went to a beer garden, Cerro, Patagonia, and the beer was excellent. They had all sorts of beer, and you would have thought you were in Austria because they had all of the breads and pretzels and beer, and we all had a beer, and it was just a great experience. So the next morning, we head out early and we head for Cerro Catedral. It's a ski resort, and in the summertime, they still keep the ski lifts operating because of the incredible scenery and the views up on top. And the plant life up on top is just absolutely amazing. So if I remember correctly, there were 3 ski lift runs to get up to the top. And you can see the elevation of the top, 78, 90. And it's well above the tree line. And it was a miracle because there was no wind that day. It was really calm. So I know some people like my wife, she would just have a heart attack because the ski lift, these chairs go scooting by and you have to jump on and hang on so you don't fall off. And then within 5 or 10 seconds, you're up in the air 100 feet off the ground. And this is not for the faint of heart, but we all made it and we all got to the top and had a great time. So finally, we made our way up toward the top, and right up below the base of the peak, there were just slopes covered with fractured rock. And, there were 2 types of oxalis up there. This is Oxalis adenophila. The common name is shamrock, and it is in the nursery trade. It's a plant that's available to get. I think it would be tricky to grow it in New Mexico because on this peak, I doubt if it ever would get much over 70 degrees ever. There were also a lot of violas up on top. This is Viola sacculus, and these violas are quite succulent. If you ignore the flowers, they look a lot like a hen and chick, or like a sempervivum. But obviously they're violas, so they're related to pansies. And this genus is very complex in the Andes in Argentina and Chile. Another view of the Viola sacculus. It's a really beautiful plant.
There's no soil there, I just got a real big root where it goes down.
I have no idea about the root system. I would suspect it's not. I don't think any violas are tuberous, but I don't know. But there would be soil that the wind blows in between the rocks. So I was up at about 7,500 feet here. And this is the other oxalis that's up here on the high mountain, erythrorhiza. The name means red roots. So this sounds, well, this thing grows like a big, thick cushion. Okay.
Is that all one plant?
Yes, it's all one plant. So I want to show you some scenery. This is where we were walking around up on top of this mountain. And in the background, you can see 3 black volcanoes that are pretty prominent. And way in the background, there's a little tiny black cone sticking up. That one's really far away, like 100 miles away. That one is in Chile. And in the foreground is a plant of the oxalis erythrorhiza. And so we were walking along, off to the left is the peak. And we were walking along this rocky slope, and there were violas and oxalis and many other plants scattered in between the rocks. There was another species of viola up here. This one doesn't have the red margin on the leaf. Viola petrea, with these really beautiful large white flowers.
Are they fragrant?
No, I didn't smell anything. So here's what the shamrock looks like when you see the whole landscape, the oxalis adenophylla. They made these clusters of about typically 12 to 18 inches across. And you can see one in the foreground and then one off to the top left. There's another oxalis up there with the pink flowers. And then the yellow flowers just under the big rock, that's a oxalis erythrorhiza. And there would be lots of little violas scattered in between the rocks. So the combination of the scenery and then all around, when you look off down below, you could see maybe 10 of these deep blue glacial lakes. So the scenery here, your brain is just on complete overload. It's almost impossible to comprehend all this stuff. There's a close-up of another shamrock. I found them to be just incredible plants, just amazing. But again, this is a place that at the warmest of times, it's cool. And the rest of,
Just the right time
yeah,
to get that together.
well, in December, it's just the beginning of summer. I think they get about 20 feet of snow up here in the winter. So probably for 6 or 7 months, they're under snow. So they're dormant. There was another really strange plant up here. I'd never seen anything like a lot of this stuff before. It's got a huge name. Calientamoides semiversillata. So that ended that day. There were other things up there too, like there were amaryllids and I just had to cut a lot of that stuff out. Otherwise, there would be, I just couldn't show all the pictures. But so the next day we take off and we're going out into the steppe to the east of Bariloche. And almost everywhere you go, the soils are volcanic. About 10 years ago, a big volcano erupted west of Bariloche in Chile, and it dumped on the order of 12 inches of volcanic ash almost everywhere. So the people in Bariloche for like 4 or 5 days, if they went outside, they would die. It's not like, they had the inconvenience of having to wear a mask. But there was so much volcanic ash in the air that they told us that if they went outside and they breathed in this volcanic ash, they would die. So they were trapped in their houses, and eventually the ash kind of settled down. But
It's called Vesuvius.
yeah, this is Viola volcanica growing. It loves to grow in volcanic soils. And it was incredible how difficult they were to see. The flowers aren't much, but they were flat with the ground and about 2 inches across.
They are soft.
Soft.
Good camouflage.
So, we're a bunch of,
Just 2 inches.
yeah, we saw a bunch of them and a lot of other stuff, but we were heading out into the steppe and we were going to see cacti. So here's Austrocactus coxii. So at this point, we were between 40 and 50 miles east of Bariloche out into the steppe. And I'll show you several pictures. They're in new growth in the spring, all the new spines. And that's the habitat that they were growing on. It's kind of a cross between sandstone and shale. And the rocks were highly fractured. There's an Austrocactus right in the middle of the picture in the foreground. And there were quite a few plants here scattered on that slope.
Is that this year's or last year's seeds on that thing?
No, they're flower buds.
Oh,
They hadn't made fruits yet. And here, that's what the flower looked like. The flower was bigger than the plant.
would those grow outside here?
The challenge would be the summer heat.
Yeah.
That would be the main challenge,
Yeah.
is dealing with the heat.
A lot of cactus, they're always giving plant.
So we keep exploring around in this area, and we came to where the first Neuquenias were growing. And the first time you see them, you're kind of awestruck. And then after you see more and more, you'll see some that are pushing 20 feet across, and it's just unbelievable.
Are these of your relatives or
Yes.
something else?
No, they're opuntioids.
Well, that answers that.
They make
About that.
they make these cushions, and they're really dense. It's not a soft cushion at all. The stems are really packed real tightly and close together. I think you could walk on them, but I never tried it. But
Are you experimenting with volcanoes in your house?
yeah, you
And
can,
how
you
are they
can,
going through the summer heat?
I have no trouble with it, but I have them where they get afternoon shade. And you do
They
have
get
to water
warm
it.
sun, huh?
You do have to water it because
Yeah.
we're a lot drier.
But they're okay with the heat?
Yeah, they're okay.
With shade.
And that's the close-up of the flower. And you can see the stems. The stems are about the size of the last joint on your first finger. And they're really tightly packed together. And they have leaves on the stems.
Are they tuberous?
They have a permanent, I don't know. I don't know how the whole, what do you do if the plant is 20 feet across? And how the root system,
Yeah.
I
Well, I
don't,
thought maybe the ones you put in your house, saw the roots maybe.
well, they're small.
Okay.
They're inside. And there's another Neuquenia patagonia or patagonica with the long spines. Out here was a different viola. This one did not win the beauty contest. It's nothing special. Escondidoensis.
It's a rock away. It looks like rock.
Yes, it does.
We saw this plant and it just, what the hell is this? And of course, our guide Marcella, she knew what it was. She told us the name. And fortunately, Marcella has written a whole bunch of books on the flora of Patagonia. So I bought one of her books, and they're beautiful books, all colored pictures, just wonderful. The next day, we start driving from Bariloche to San Martin. And along the way, you're driving along the Rio Lime. And the scenery was just, it was just too much to take in, with the beautiful river and the mountains all around and the trees. There were,
That's where you're gonna retire from.
I don't know, but she was our guide, Marcella Ferreira. It's hard to say. She was a professor of botany, and she's retired. And she spent her whole adult life walking the mountains of Patagonia and recording the plants. So she had an amazing career. And you could tell by talking to her, she could go out with a backpack for a week and eat the snow and carry some food, and she would be looking at plants all day, and she would just be in hog heaven. She was very enthusiastic all the time. And every time we saw a new plant, she was just bubbly about it. Oh, this is so beautiful. I love this plant. So now we start going up this river valley on the way to San Martin. And here the ostrocactus were growing on a really steep slope. And this slope, it almost collapsed just of its own weight. It was very crumbly, but I was able to take a picture of the ostrocactus in flower. A little bit further on, we came to a big rocky outcrop along the road. One thing about Patagonia is that there are almost no fences. It's really nice not to have to worry about fences, but it seems like you could walk just about any place, and it wasn't really an issue. But anyway, we climbed and we explored around this big rocky outcrop, and there were ostrocactus here in huge numbers. They looked kind of like a super spiny Coccineus in a way, but they were really spiny. Flowers were amazing.
What's the closest relative, you think, that we know?
Dave,
Rhodius, I think it's very,
Ariosize?
no. They look like Rhodius, they look a lot like Rhodius. Yeah, but their closest relative is, I think, like, my brain is for the boreal cactus, that.
Really? That's strange. Well, anyway, that's ostrocactus coxy in flower. We just saw so many other plants. This is an amaryllis lily, Zephyranthes. Flowers were very nice. There's a close-up of the flowers being pollinated by bees. So we head up further toward the west and get closer to the Andes. And then we entered the forest of araucaria trees along the Rio Alumine. They're really bizarre the first time you see them. They're just so strange looking. And the cones are really huge. Marcella told us that if a fresh cone from a high tree would fall and hit you on the head, you would be injured. The cones are about the size of a soccer ball.
Wow. But it's a type of pine tree.
Yeah, it's a type of conifer. It's very primitive.
Wow.
Tons of them in South America, tons.
And one of the guys on the trip was Rod Haney. He's from Denver, and he's now the president of CSSA. So I had a great time with Rod. He's a lot of fun. That's the trunk of the Araucaria tree. And a little further on up this river valley, we came to this, and the people, the indigenous people to this area were the Mapuche, but the Spanish killed about, I don't know, like 98% of them. And now the Mapuches have reservations. And you had to cross this bridge in order to get to their reservation. We were standing here just surveying the scene, and this Mapuche guy came up on a little motorcycle. You know, the kind that sounds like a mosquito. And he just cruised up and just zipped across on that bridge. It's obviously a homemade bridge, and he just took off and out of sight. But you have to be Mapuches to cross the bridge. It's other people are prohibited to cross.
Why is it that they do that?
Well, the Mapuches, now they've been granted exclusive control over certain lands, just like we have reservations here. So there are scattered Mapuche villages, but
Mapuches in Argentina, Chile too.
yeah, the history of the Mapuches is pretty
Well, I'm
bleak.
asking is why would they only allow in there? Like sacred land or something?
It's they're tired of people coming in and screwing with them.
Private property.
You know, in New Mexico, we have all the, Indians, land grants. They can determine when visitors can come, and because of COVID, for a long time, a lot of the,
They were
like
closed.
San Ildefonso would totally close, nobody could come. So they have control over it. And if they say, we don't want the white people that have cheated us forever and ever, you know.
So the next day,
San Diego Pueblo has roads that are.
Right.
the next day we head out to see a volcano, and it was just amazing. The name of the volcano, it's on the screen, Mateo Mapueda. So we start driving up into the mountains.
You were sleeping on the ground each and every night, right?
No, we had guest houses. They were modest, but they were perfectly fine. It's very cheap to travel in Argentina, or it was. This is another orchid. As we climbed the slopes of this volcano, there were just hundreds of these orchids all around, or thousands in flower, Chlorea alpina. And there was another species of orchid, Chlorea Magellanica. I think most of you know Panayiotis. He's been with the Denver Botanical Garden for about 40 years. He's a very enthusiastic and effervescent guy. And then there's Marcella, and she's even more effervescent and enthusiastic. So we were always, we were having botanical elations many times a day.
Well, you can really see how huge that tree is.
Oh, the trees
Kind
are
of.
big.
By having them.
So we just start climbing up up this volcano. And we're just on the lower slopes of it, and I turned around and that's what I saw.
Yeah.
So everywhere, almost everywhere we looked, the scenery was just without end. So we start climbing up the volcano, and it was quite a vigorous walk. It was quite difficult to get up there. It doesn't look like it here, but everything is on a large scale.
And that's snow? The white-
Snow, and then in the middle of the volcano, there's a crater lake inside Pateo Magueda. On the way up to the slopes, as we climbed the volcano, there were a lot of viola cotyledons, just thousands of them in flower. And after a long climb, the last bit was close to 1,000 feet. If you stack up pumice, billions of cubic yards of pumice, it'll make a terminal gradient. It can't get any steeper because it just starts to slide. So the whole top part of the volcano was a steep gradient of pumice, and it's not easy to walk on it. And I really had to struggle to make it up there because you were slipping, and it was unreal. But that's what happens if you persist and you make it up to the top. And right at my feet, it's a snow field. And then looking down at the crater lake inside, and all around, there's billions of cubic yards of pumice. So that's the view up on top. There's Marcella. And then the guy in the orange jacket, we had rented like a minivan for the trip. And the driver, he owned the van, so he was with us all the time. And I had a lot of fun with him.
But he's speaking English.
Yeah. His English was better than my Spanish. So that's the view from the top of the crater looking down. And guess what? Marcella said there was a rare plant that grew only on the side, right where the slope comes. So we kind of poke our heads over the side and hope we survive. And this plant was growing along the rim of the crater, Aricia fragrans. So that finished that day. We make our way down, and the next day we head out again a little bit into the steppe. And this is the area that we were in. And this day the wind was, I think, a steady between like 60 and 75 miles an hour. So even walking sometimes was difficult. And it looks like a kind of a barren habitat, but it was just filled with little tiny plants. There were a lot of calendrinias around here. That's a succulent with a thick root and nice white flowers. Even though we were in a dry area, there were mountains off in the distance, and so the snow was melting. So there were streams flowing through the dry steppe country. And okay. In the area, again, more violas. This is maculata. And I'll show more pictures of the plant on the bottom right. That looks like a nice soft green plant, but the leaves and the rosettes, it's as if the plant was cast from steel. You can't move anything on that plant. You can't bend a leaf. It's just unbelievable. It's an azarella.
But what is it?
It's an azarella.
Azarella?
That's the genus name.
What, do you know what it's related to?
No, you'll have to look it up. And the leaves are just like steel. You can't move them. You can't. I walked on some and it did nothing.
Azorella.
Yeah, it'll be on the screen.
It wasn't on the screen.
No, but
Oh, later.
in the future. So here the Mahuenias were getting big. And this was about a 20-footer. And this is all one plant. And it just kind of undulates like a blob, a monster. And coming into flower,
How old do you think that might be?
only Dave knows.
I don't know, a few hundred years. Maybe more.
I think more. I think they could be pushing
I
1,000.
mean, they grow pretty fast, but out there, probably not.
But there's a young one. It was a foot across.
How old do you think that is?
I wouldn't be surprised if it was 15 years old. And here in the same area, I found this really attractive. Calendrinia Scottsburgii. Really bright orange flowers. So we're still out here on this windswept steppe. And Marcella says, well, we have to climb this peak because there's some really cool stuff here. And in order to get up to the peak, we were crawling because if you stood up, you'd be blown off. So none of the plants there were more than about a half-inch tall, because anything taller than that would get blown away. But these were really cute growing in the rocks. They're in the pea family, Adesnia, growing in the crumbly rocks. So we climbed down the peak. In the background, you can see the typical Patagonian highway, which are dirt, but in general, they're good roads. They're pretty decent. Whoops. Oh. Somebody wants to join the meeting. So there's another orchid on the side. I mean, here we are on a freezing cold mountain. The wind is ripping. Did you expect to see orchids? No, there were hundreds of these orchids. I couldn't take a picture close to the flower because it would just be a because they were flying back and forth. Okay, my screen has frozen there. Is that the next one? Okay. Okay, we go down lower in elevation. Down away from the mountains, and now we're down in a real broad valley. And this was the first pterocactus, Neuquensis, named after the province. And if you're not familiar with pterocactus, what makes them really unique in the cactus family is that the seed is flat. It's just like the seed of an elm. It's almost like a piece of paper, and you cut a circle that's quite big, close to a 1/4 inch in diameter. So most cactus seeds are round, but this thing is real thin, and it's obviously designed well. Would it be an advantage to blow around in the wind in Patagonia? And they have really tuberous roots. They'll have a big root, bigger than a grapefruit, and then the stems are really small up on top. The stem was about the size of a golf ball here. So we started hiking around. We saw there were 2 kinds here. There was the previous one, and then here's Pterocactus australis on the right with the flat white spines.
Wildlife in this area?
Yes, there were the big birds, the rhea, like ostriches.
Any condors?
No, I didn't see a condor.
Yeah, rattlesnakes.
Well, yes, but I did, there's too much stuff to show you. So where we were walking around looking at the taro cactus, this is the view. It's another national park, Laguna Blanca, with snow-capped mountains off in the distance. That black shape by the lake, that was the visitor center. We were the only people in this national park. We didn't see a single other car. And, can you imagine this beauty? And there's just so much of it.
How far is that from Bariloche?
Oh, maybe a couple 100 miles.
Oh, pretty far.
Well, this is like the 4th or 5th day.
Okay, you're going to, right?
Yeah, we're going north. So here's another Pterocactus australis that was growing by this lake. Really beautiful plants.
Yeah. Is it a lot warmer in this area?
No,
Uh,
no, I wouldn't say it's a lot warmer. Instead of being 50 degrees with a hurricane, it was like 60 degrees and a 30-mile-an-hour wind.
Still pretty windy.
Are those additional, just? one,
Yes.
2, 3,
Yeah,
they look like potato.
they're old stems that are past their prime. But there's what the flower looks like from the side. And there's what the flower looks like from the top. And these are quite cold hardy. I used to grow quite a few of these in Berlin. So they can be grown here. I have some Pterocactus tuberosus out in my yard at home now, and they seem to be okay. More violas here. Viola tectiflora with open flowers, and you can see what it's growing in. It's a kind of a volcanic grit. So we press on and get higher up, closer to the Andes, and we come to an area where we see another viola, pachysoma. They look to me a lot like mammillarias from a distance. So we make it at the end of the day to this village of Kawiawe. And it seems to be that it's a quite new place. There's an amazing volcano here that's just absolutely mind-blowing. And the scenery here is, if you can go to Kawiawe, it's just unbelievable. But here's the new village, and we spent the night here. And
What tree?
that's what the village of Kawiawe looked like. And all around the town, in between houses, we saw lots of Mahuenia popigii. These grow at higher elevation. So in the next morning, we got up, and the project this day was to spend most of the day on Vulcan Popawe. And the elevation of Popawe is 9,833 feet. That's the mountain in the background. We saw occasionally, we saw maybe a dozen lakes around the area. And what we're going to do today, we had to get a road to go around to the side of the volcano, and then we're going to work our way up toward the top.
So how far does the car drive? You don't start hiking right from the lake.
No, there was a dirt road, and we drove. There were these amaryllis by the thousands. The Rhododendron and Anicola. It's amazing when you see a field of thousands of these things in flower. So we make we're we're starting to climb the volcano, and partway up the volcano, there's this village of Copawe. And at Copawe, there's a lot of active volcanism. There's a bunch of hot pools, and here's a pool that's steamy water. It's always bubbling. The smell of sulfur was really strong in the air here. Well, I was going to say something about Copawe. They have to abandon the town in the winter here because they get something like 30 feet of snow. So when the summer season is over, they all pack up everything and they have to leave because they just abandon it and they can't deal with all the snow in the winter. So now we're making our way up the side of the Volcan Copawe, and there were many lakes along the flank of the volcano. And on the very top of the volcano, we just didn't have time to go all the way up there, but there's a huge crater lake up on top, and the pH of the water in the lake, Sig, you're not going to believe this.
Okay,
The pH is 0.18.
oh my God, and how the hell does that ever happen?
That's something, yeah, I'm figuring it out.
No, I don't believe it.
No, that's what they say.
There's no source in the city that. Yeah,
Nothing can live in that water, right?
Well,
no.
special fish.
Actually, pure HF or something like that. I don't understand.
How do they measure that? How much acid would eat up your instrument?
I'm just telling you that that's what the geologists claim is the pH of this lake.
So why is that being so low?
So anyway,
That's the question.
I'm gonna press on. So one side of the volcano was this snow field and all of, okay, so now we go to the Garden of Eden. We just go around to a different, we're on the side of the same volcano. And this side is more sheltered, and it maybe it's on the north side where it's a little warmer. And we come to a forest of araucaria trees, and there were waterfalls galore.
Oh, see the person down below?
Yeah,
Behind you.
we were hiking on a trail, and we hiked as far, we saw 7 of these waterfalls, and everywhere were the araucaria trees, and the water was making a thunderous roar from crashing on the rocks. And we just kept hiking, and eventually we ran out of daylight and had to turn back. And it's hard to believe that you see all of this just on one volcano, and there's more to come. So another thing that we saw quite a bit of in here, there's still quite a few gauchos, and they have a pretty hard life. They spend all year with their animals, and some of them have sheep and goats, and other gauchos had cattle. But in the summertime, they drove their animals up into the mountains where the pasture was better, and they all had exclusive use of assigned areas. And then when winter came, then they would have to walk all their animals, and I think they would have to walk them up to 200 miles, and they would go down into the steppe and they would spend the winter. So, you know, what a life. So I told you about the volcano Copawe. This is one of the rivers that flows off the volcano. And the river was orange from all the sulfur in it. And the smell of sulfur here was just overwhelming.
that what causes the acidity of the
Let-
water?
No, let's get specific here. The smell, sulfur has no smell. If you smell what you think of sulfur, it's got sulfur.
Right,
It's the
okay,
arachidonic.
right. Okay.
Sulfur's there, but it's tied up as sulfide.
Now look at the river.
Don't know what the color is. They took in, elemental sulfur oxidized surfaces further.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, me neither.
Wow. How many places can you see an orange river?
I can't figure out the low pH. I mean, you can't make sulfuric acid out of this stuff.
Yes, you can.
You
have air.
No, you need catalyst. And
Okay,
you need
well-
temperature.
We have to press on.
Yeah.
Take it outside, take it.
So here. On the slopes above the river, of course, what are we doing? We're walking around looking at plants. This is a wild nasturtium. And,
Are those flowers or leaves?
no, they're flowers. Come on, you insult me. You
On the
insult
right
me.
side.
There's a close-up of the flowers. It's in the same genus as nasturtiums. Tropaeolum.
That's the genus of this person.
I'm gonna press on. So along the river, there's a waterfall. And in the Spanish language, every waterfall is called a salto. And this is the Salto de Agrio. And the height of the cascade here is 197 feet. So the picture doesn't really capture the grandeur of the whole scene here. Lots of noise. So we get back in the van and we head a little further north. And we find a big rocky outcrop, so we stop and look, and here's another austrocactus. I'm not 100% sure of the name. It's not easy to name these things. But I think it's colon corensis. And I think there's a picture of the flower. The color of the flower is so vivid, it's just amazing. And there's the view of the habitat. This is all kind of a volcanic conglomerate.
Does the orange hue of plant have anything to do with that pH?
No. No, it's nothing.
It has a very prominent orange hue.
Yeah, there's no connection. And here were more Moenias, Popigii. And we started seeing a few other kinds of cacti, Moeniopsis platyacanthus, with the flat papery spines. Most of them were very unattractive. Half the plant would be dead and they weren't well groomed. Another Moeniopsis here, Darwinii. And I have grown Darwinii in my yard for about 6 years now. And they do fine and they flower like crazy every spring.
Where did you come and show and sell?
It's in the ground.
Oh,
You need to move them up the hill to Los Alamos.
So the next day, we're on our way to this other amazing volcano, El Tromen. It's a protected natural area. And you can see the volcano in the background.
Quick question, so protected nature area means national park.
Right. So on the way out to this volcano, we passed several camps where the gauchos took their animals for the summer. So they had stone corrals set up where the animals would go when they needed protection or maybe at night. And then the gauchos would have a really primitive place to sleep at night. Now we're approaching El Tromen, and the elevation is 13,052 feet. And the scale of everything here was just epic. Off to the left a little bit there was a salty playa and there were flamingos in it, but I couldn't get a decent picture. It was just too far away. They were just so far away, I couldn't get an image that really showed anything, but. And the white up on the mountains, those are small snow fields. And you can see the black stripes of lava coming off the slope. There was a really active lava flow here about 500 years ago. Here's one of these Azarella monantha, where the leaves are immovable, like steel. There is an Azarella in flower with the yellow flowers. Behind it was about a 50-foot thick lava flow. The rocks in the lava flow varied from, most of them were between the size of a stove in the kitchen up to a refrigerator. You can't, you just can't capture this in the picture. And then the massive mountain in the background. But they get even higher. Here's Volcan del Muyo. And this is the highest volcano in Patagonia, 15,427 feet high. And up on top, there's 6 crater lakes. We didn't do it.
So are those trees naturally occur or they are?
I think they're not native. I think they came from Europe.
Okay. This one very common.
So here's another really beautiful viola, Rubra marginata. You see the red stripe on the side of the leaves. A view from the top of the viola. And this was our last day. We're now really close to the northern edge of Neuquen. And I don't know how they got this name. It must be a Mapuche name that the Spanish butchered. The Polifcan. But the lake here was really beautiful. We spent the day hiking around here. And the peaks of the mountain in the background were the border between Argentina and Chile. That's Marcella. Around the lake, we saw quite a few ostracactus. Here's a different species, Hibernus. And Mahuenia papygii in flower. And that's what the flowers look like after they've been fertilized. These are immature fruits on the Mahuenias.
Like little pumpkins.
The plants here were commonly like 5 to 10 feet across. Only just the tip of the stem came up above the volcanic grit.
And you're seeing immature or cylindrical leaves there mostly?
Yeah, Mahuenias have leaves all the time.
Okay,
They have persistent leaves.
yeah, you're seeing the little pencil lid looking size things or.
Yeah, they come up they come up above the volcanic grit. Almost every place here is volcanic
Yeah.
of one thing or another.
Oh,
And this is the last slide. It's just again the overwhelming beauty of the scenery. An ostracactus hibernus in flower with the mountains in the background.
The first time you've been to this country,
Yes,
not the first time you're gonna go back.
no, I'd love to go back a lot because it's just so
Yeah,
incredible.
it sounds like you thoroughly
What
enjoyed
time
it.
of year did you go?
December,
And is that a bush? On either
yes,
side?
it's a bush. I don't know.
You know what they can do? Wow.
That's all.
Terrific.